You demanded my entire team be at the office for the 4th of July. Fine, enjoy paying for the office party, by user the lightning count 1. So this starts on Monday, the 13th, as I receive an email from a VP not over my department, or bad VP. I am told that my team will be required on the 4th. I politely tell them no, that our team has been scheduled this day off and people already have plans. My team is the IT team and, as many of you know, IT team gets shafted every time it can get shafted by any company. So over the course of the week I let my team know what is happening. I let them know I have been reaching out to higher ups to fix it. I also tell them that if their plans are ruined, I will make it right at work. Over the course of 3 meetings, it start to look like things will not go my way. In response I send an email to the CEO of the company. All of my higher ups know I was going to do this and said I should do this as he is very family oriented and that he would not allow anyone to work on a national holiday. Well, he is on vacation in the Bahamas until the 6th. But his assistant informed me he would look at this after he gets back. Repeatedly slams head into desk. So I tell everyone that it will be work from home, and that we will be setting my cell phone as priority in the call routing. Meaning I would get most of the calls. To be honest, I was expecting almost 0 calls. Especially since I was asked to send out a notification that IT support would cover the 4th of July. I never sent that email out. A day later I was given another outrage. I was told in an email that my employees would be required to be at the office, and no one was allowed to work from home. They would be checking the door badges to verify we were at the office. I asked why in an email, and they said that they wanted to make sure no one was playing video games at work. We normally work from home about 2/3 of the week and video game playing is a normal occurrence at work. So I walked into the person's office. After a very long conversation where she was losing the logic war with me, she told me that it's just IT, you guys don't have lives. No, I am not kidding you, this is exactly what they told me. I reported this to my VP who said, I will take care of this. It likely won't be until after the 4th, so get creative. I know this man well. We have worked together a long time and get creative is code for corporate fuckery. I asked the person requiring us to be at the office if they cared if we had an office party. They said no, as long as it did not interfere with the call flow. Even suggested using my new company card to pay for it. Go wild. Pro tip, never tell me go wild. At this point, it was Tuesday the 21st. I let everyone know what's up, but that I have something planned. I asked who had things planned for that day. 2 people told me they were planning to shoot off fireworks with their family, but the rest were planning BBQs with friends. I write up an email to the VP over my department and the bad VP. I tell them all that I let everyone know. We all were expected to work until 8 p.m. Monday. Per the conversation with the bad VP, I will be having an office party as a sort of sorry to the guys and gals who got shafted by this decision. The bad VP replied again. Thank you for your understanding. Also yes, I would expect an office party if I had to work on the 4th of July as well. So go wild and enjoy your time. Use your new company credit card if you need to cover a few expenses. Also I should not have to remind you or anyone else. No fireworks or alcohol on company property. So now it is time to tell you about my office. See, a while back, the IT team was moved from the main corp office and into a smaller building by itself. It has a nice gaming break room, a decent-sized gym, and a full-on drink bar. Soft drinks mind you, no alcohol at work. Out back is a big patio that crosses county lines as soon as you cross a small creek. A creek that just so happens to have a footbridge over it, leading to an empty field. I start making phone calls. Monday, June the 25th. I call up everyone into an hour early meeting that morning. I explain to them all that I will be making it right. I asked everyone to invite their friends and family to the office. No supplies will need to be brought by anyone. I tell them all that this will be non-alcoholic, but that I will be planning something for everyone. I told them to expect all food to be provided and they don't need to bring anything, unless they want to bring some fireworks. I.e. they won't have to spend a dime. The 4th comes and the entire day, we did absolutely no work. No tickets, no calls came in. Well, 7 calls did come in, but from the same person. The bad VP. She was calling to make sure we were manning the phones. All of us were playing video games or watching movies. 6 p.m. rolls around and everyone was told that the food was ready. People were expecting hot dogs, hamburgers, maybe a bratwurst or 2. What they got was a full-on barbecue feast with pizza and other foods. There was smoked brisket, spare ribs, smoked sausage, smoked turkey, both kinds of tater salad, coleslaw, green beans with bacon and onion, potatoes au gratin, pizza from 2 different places, excellent hamburgers and bratwurst hot dogs. On the desserts side was cake, very good cookies, 4 different kinds of pies, and about 2 pounds of fudge. Families and friends started showing up at around 6-6:15-ish. Some brought alcohol, but I told them they would need to leave that in their cars as I was not that crazy. Some were not too happy about that but agreed as it was a free dinner for random strangers. So let me set the scene for you. I am out there with all calls routed to my cell phone, and everyone just having a good time. We have a ton of people there just enjoying the fun night, chatting about random stuff, eating the food, and occasionally lighting off some sparklers or throwing firecrackers into the stream. It's not stocked and only 1 foot deep. My VP, not the bad VP mind you, showed up with his family and brought some water balloons for the kids, and man-children. Around 8:30-ish it's getting dark and people want to shoot off more than the simple sparklers and firecrackers we had been using. The VP over the IT department had everyone cross the footbridge, over county line and off company property mind you, and we set up a big wooden board using it as our launch pad. We fired off what we had for an hour or two, and sort of just hang out for a little while. At around this time people were tired and ready to head home. I told people to take home leftovers, within reason. We all clocked out at 8 and no one left until about 10:30. The bad VP did call once more while we were out back at the party. It was 7:50 and she called asking for a status update. My exact words were, "Well, you were the only one to call us today. The rest of us are on the back patio enjoying the 4th of July shindig." She simply acted like my boss and said as long as no alcohol or fireworks are on company property, I do not care. We ate roughly half of the food catered. The rest was taken home. A small group volunteered to stay behind to clean up including my VP. We had a funny conversation about how this will make waves with the bosses. But he said he had my back and asked me how much this cost. I just gave him a sideways look which made him laugh. Tuesday morning, I submitted the expense report to my VP. This email would inevitably make its way over to the bad VP and up the chain to the CIO of the company. It would be a bad idea to give out the exact cost of the party, mind you, but I can tell you that because of this 4th of July party, new rules were put into place. Any expenses of over 4K or more must be approved by the direct supervisor, VP over the department, and the full expense report must be sent to the financial department for review after the fact. Hint, the party cost over 6K. The barbecue was the most expensive part. I did not order from a low or mid-tier place. The place I ordered from has consistently been on the top 10 in the DFW listing for the last 30 years. I ate at that place so much I made friends with the owner. The best barbecue I have ever had. The pies and cakes were custom made by a bakery and the cookies were made by a boutique cookie place. I had 10-12 packs of Coke, Coke Zero, DP, DP Zero, Pepsi, and Pepsi Zero. I bought 5 pepperoni, 5 sausage, 5 cheese, 2 Hawaiian, and 3 cheeseburger pizzas from one place, and nearly the same number from another place. Excluding the cheeseburger ones, I subbed out those for a different specialty pizza from the other place. The burgers were from an excellent burger place that did catering. I know that owner well. He brought his kids for the night of fun after he heard what was going to be happening. He was also the one who brought the brat dogs as he recently added those to his menu. This was the most expensive office party in the history of the company. The only things more expensive than this were some business meetings that the CEO rented private rooms in high-end restaurants for. As for the CEO, he was outraged. Not at the cost of the party, mind you. He knew that the party would not have been necessary if people had been allowed to go home. He was outraged that IT was the only group required to work on that day. When I submitted the logs showing how we received no real phone calls, no service requests, and that we basically watched movies/played video games during our shift, he had heard enough. He apparently sent out a scathing email about work-life balance and the importance of our holidays to every upper management. It was kind of funny as people wanted me to get in trouble for what I did, but the reality is other departments have done similar things in the past, just not on the scale that IT did. The bad VP was admonished quite effectively and sent me an apology email. I forwarded it to the team with a strong hint to not reply. Then my VP let the CIO and the CEO know about what the bad VP said. "You guys don't have lives." The bad VP did actually confirm she said it in a meeting with her EVP. It did not go over well. I have never heard people yelling in an office meeting like that before. The CEO of the company came to our office and yelled at her. Not sure if she was fired, but she is not at work today. In Active Directory she does not have the down arrow of death, so not 100% what happened to her. I know she lost whatever clout she had at this company with her attitude. If anything more happens, I will update. But so far it looks like the fallout from this is I caused a new rule to be put in place about how much you are allowed to spend at one time. The bad VP may or may not be let go / forced to resign. I know she got yelled at. Strangely there is now no longer any pushback for my bid to get everyone back to working from home. Edit, please stop asking me where the restaurants are. I'm not doxing myself. Boss's boss THRE Athens to fire me, I accept and get himself and his friends fired, by user Warrior 044. This whole story happened in 2021 and ended in October, damn time flies, and it is something that puts a Cheshire smile on my face. Warning. This is a very extensive story, grab some popcorn, wink with tongue sticking out. Background, ignore if you like. In January 2021 I began working for a very big American company, in Europe, that was, and is, in the energy sector. At the factory plant I began working at, the parts of gas turbines get assessed for restoration and reworked so they can get used again. Each single part would cost several thousand when produced new, and hold for like a decade or so. Reworking cost like 1/4 of that and the part would be good for another 8 to 10 years, with more inspections of course for safety. The customers would pay like half or 3/4 of the cost of a new part, and since we talk 2-8K per single part, and a gas turbine containing thousands of pieces we speak several million for each gas turbine. Customer would save a good chunk, and of course the company was sitting on a golden goose. Over the decades that meant, that the facility where the stuff was reworked, had an absolute uncontested income, without much of competition, since the parts were their own design and production, and a win-win for customer and company. Over time that led to the problem that competence, invention, or even honesty, were not needed by the management of the facility anymore. As long as the workers stick to the already developed and tested processes and did their job, money would keep flowing in regardless what the office did or did not. You can see where this is going. Setup, somewhat important. So I was hired there as part of quality control. Specifically, I was to operate an 3D computer-managed measuring machine. Gas turbines get, as you can imagine, pretty hot and spin fast. And a decade of heat combined with dynamic stress has the nasty habit to deform stuff. Can't have that for sure, so you have to measure the stuff really precisely so that the production knows what section of which piece needs reworking, or if a piece is too out of form to be used again at all. The operation of such a machine is not too complicated. Put the piece into bracket, clamp it down, load the correct model and start the program. You get the measurement report then as an text file, an Excel as well as a PDF. The pieces, usually rotary blades, nearly always came in sets, 24 to 216, depending on the size. When all are measured you compile all the reports the machine made, into one Excel with a somewhat complicated method. Wasn't hard, I learned all that in a week. That machine was immensely important for the facility, running in 2 to 3 shifts per day, 6 days per week. Like 80% of all pieces that went through the reworking process had to be measured at least twice. As nearly anyone with a technical background can guess, operating a machine and understanding what it is actually doing are two big different shoes. When I started there were only 3 guys that understood the machine properly, as well as a technician, Vladimir, who could actually fix codes, or reprogram a 3D model, if there was a problem. Vladimir however was the technician for the entire facility, very busy guy, and when he had to come over, his time would need to be paid by the department, something the bosses didn't encourage so to say. Of the 3 guys who knew the machine, Antonio is important. He had been working there for a few centuries at least, knew every nook and cranny and, while being a simple worker, if shit went wrong, he was the guy you turned to. He had a bit of a short temper and a very blunt language, but he was honest, open, and very fair. I myself am not the most social person, always held back, with a brutal honesty, and I take my professional cold attitude a bit too serious I guess. In general, if people share my principles of honesty, fairness, and taking responsibilities serious, then we get along greatly, but with people that are less trustworthy I basically turn to an ice block. Not perfect I know, but hey, I don't work in retail for good reason. So thing is, despite some heated arguments, Antonio and me really got along swimmingly. What no one knew was, that Antonio had, over the decades, collected such a backlog of days off, overtime and whatnot, that he could retire 2 years early, and he was 63. He had decided to groom me as his successor, and began teaching me every little detail about the measuring machine, how to fix stuff, how to do proper maintenance, why it did certain stuff and so on. He was a perfectionist, but so am I, so I really appreciated it. What I noticed in my first week in the company, was the biggest problem there. The facility had a massive problem with cliques, clans, and little circles. If you were part of the correct clique, you could do what you want and remain untouchable. If you aren't, well, your credit goes to anyone but you, and you are a fine scapegoat. I didn't care much about it, be honest. I am a bit of a rule fanatic and stick to them even when everyone else ignores them. For me this was a well-paying job, with a horrible commute, 1 3/4 hours in one direction, so I wanted to stay there for as long as I could, earn my money and then just take the next job. There was a fourth guy who was operating the machine, I don't remember his name, so let's call him Igor. Igor was part of the same clique as my boss, Manuel, my boss's boss, Freddy, and of course his own boss, Boris, who was also his brother. He was working the measuring machine, simple because it was the most comfortable job he could perform. He was usually doing the night shift, as those paid extra. He occasionally took the late shift, while I always took the early one, was the least popular, due to start at 6 am, but I liked going home at 3 pm. Igor was, well, as light bulb, he was like a wet match in a dark basement somewhere in a black hole. I might be a bit too harsh with him now, but that was all I ever got to see from him. He was also pretty lazy, rude, and arrogant. After all, he had an untouchable status due to his brother's best friend being boss of the NITR assessment department. The actual story, long build up, I know. A good 6 months after I started there was the first incident with the measuring machine. We received the material in pallets and it was the firm rule, that the rotary blades had to be sorted in numerically order. Each had a serial number and a set number. Stuff went a ton faster and easier if all was sorted clean 1 to 82, or whatever the set went up to. OCAS only in order, which were usually 2 to 4 pallets, would arrive unsorted at the measuring machine, then we had to sort them. Since we had to lift the blades out one by one anyway to measure them, it was not that big of a deal, just a tad bit annoying. Igor never finished a set if he could help it, leaving just 1 or 2 blades left for measuring, and even when he had to finish a set and start a new one, he would never compile the reports into one Excel. I am pretty sure he didn't even knew how that worked. One morning I came to work, and like so often there was just 3 blades left to measure. I shrugged without care and wanted to just finish the order and start the next. Problem was, the pallets were a complete mess, completely unsorted, despite them being measured. Igor had worked the late shift the day before, and would also work the late shift that day, so I would actually get to see him for a few minutes when I handed my shift over. This of course meant, that I would have to sort all of the pallets, while also operating the machine with the next order as to avoid a delay. The machine was a bit of a bottleneck in the facility. Usually this is a chill post. The blades are never heavier than 22 kg, 48 pound, and you had like 6 to 14 minutes between the measurement cycles to lift them out, and exchange them with the last measured blade. Sorting the last order took me 2 hours of quite sweaty work while also operating the machine nearby, so I was somewhat annoyed. When Igor came in the afternoon, I asked him in a politely manner, why he had not sorted that one order. He replied in quite a rude tone, that he wouldn't do that. I was a bit baffled and asked, if he didn't knew, that it was mandatory to do that. He simply replied, in a pretty rude tone again, that he wouldn't speak about that. Outright refusing to speak about a problem? What the hell? I told him, that if he didn't want to speak about it, I would have to speak about it with my boss. He just smiled in a smug fashion and told me to do that. Well, I did just that. Asked my boss about it, in the fashion of, hey, either we were supposed to sort that stuff, or did we change that? This led to a 4-way talk with my boss, Igor, as well as Boris. Boris was not happy at all, and my boss was rather embarrassed, because it was all clear, that I was correct, but neither of them wanted to admit that their friend had done anything wrong. I did my usual ice block impression, showing a blank face, replying in very accurate and short words and staying all polite and professional. It came out rather inconclusive with a kind request that we should please sort the pallets if they came in as a mess. Igor just shrugged and it was clear that he didn't care. It happened 3 more times that stuff came in unsorted, but Igor managed to avoid doing it ever. Okay. Strike 1/3. 6 weeks later there was the second incident. Every morning before I started, I would maintain the machine like Antonio had showed me to do, cleaning everything and rubbing special liquid into stone tread the machine's arch ran back and forth on. One morning I came in, and turned the machine into manual mode like every morning, so that I could run the arch to the end of the thread for maintenance. A second thereafter I heard a grinding noise and instantly stopped the machine. The arch was a air cushion based runner, kinda like a hovercraft, as where the bottom of the arch would always remain a tiny bit above the surface to ensure minimum vibration. So a grinding sound is really bad. I quickly inspected the thread and found quite the deep crater in the stone surface, maybe 2 to 3 centimeters deep, an inch, and wide. That was enough for the air cushion to lose pressure, so the arch was sliding over the stone surface of the thread. This inspection also revealed scratches along nearly the entire length of the tread, so it was pretty clear that the machine had been running with this crater for a good bit. Immediately shut down the machine, informed Vladimir as well as my boss, that some big shit was going on here. I also took pictures of the damage with time stamps, just out of my usual paranoia. The machine was put out of commission, as the arch had taken damage. The entire stone tread had to be reworked and the machine needed recalibration. It was out for over a month due to that crater. That crater BTW looked exactly like the bottom corner of one of the blade, as if one had been dropped onto the stone tread, and the previous shift before me had drumrolls / Igor. Of course he denied that he had done anything wrong, and he could also not recall seeing any scratches or hear any grinding noise during his shift. He tried to blame it on me, but I had reported the stuff like 5 minutes in my shift, with the last blade Igor had measured still in the machine. Again it was clear to all who had fucked up, but again not even a harsh word to him. While the machine was getting fixed and reworked, we were put to different work. I got into the pre-assessment team, where the pieces get their first evaluation. I made good friends there which would serve as my ears later on. Strike 2/3. After the machine got fixed a good month later, we had collected a massive backlog, to the point that the other departments, who did the repair, were struggling to find something to do, that didn't needed measurements. The machine was supposed to work in 3 shifts, but Antonio had left for his 2-year vacation when the machine had been put out for repairs, and the other 2 colegas, who knew how to run, and maintain, the machine, had left for better jobs. So it was only me and Igor by then, with me working quite some overtime for good pay. All bullshit aside, hourly wage was really proper. One morning I noticed something pretty weird. The order I had just started the previous afternoon was still not finished, again with just 2 blades remaining. Every measurement report has a timestamp, which I quickly had a look into. The measurement cycle for these was like 3 minutes plus 1 minute exchanging one blade for the next. For some reason the measurement reports from Igor's shift had like 10 to 15 minutes gaps in between, some even half an hour. Igor was still around, as he had had the night shift. I knew he was a bit of a slacker, but these gaps were quite big, so I first thought there had been trouble with the machine. I asked him if he had had any trouble with the machine last night and he snapped at me, that all had been fine. I asked if he was sure and he in return inquired why I asked. I told him that there were quite some heavy gaps in between the measurement report, and that I couldn't find any error messages of sudden stops or such. Igor looked at those timestamps for a moment, back at me and just shrugged before he went home. That would have been the end of it, if it wouldn't have been even stranger the next shift, Monday. I had, for once, not worked on Saturday, so Igor had 3 shifts and since I had last clocked out. I came in as usual, did the maintenance and cleaning and wanted to check how far he had gotten. 4 orders had went through since my last shift, so I assumed that, as usual, I would have to compile the reports. But there were none. I was pretty confused, searching the orders numbers, checking the machine protocol and all. The measuring machine had been running over the weekend with no shutdown or restart visible in the log, but also no measurement reports at all. I called in Vladimir, as well 4 orders worth of reports missing is a big deal. According to rules, I also informed my boss, that the machine was standstill due to technical issues. Both Vladimir and my boss came into the measuring room and we 3 searched for the problem. It took us a while to figure it out, simple to it being absolutely not expected, someone had turned off the output of the machine, maybe to avoid the timestamps. This again caused quite some ruckus, as all 4 orders had to be measured again with reports, and production was really struggling now to have something to work on. Again, all clear who had fucked up, and finally Freddy had enough, but not of Igor. The MaliciousCompliance, finally XD. The afternoon of the same day, Freddy, the boss of the entire assessment department came into my measuring room, nice expensive suit, tie, polished shoes, and went straight into my face. I was currently sitting in my chair, compiling the results of the remeasured first order, when he stood before me, giving me no room to get up. He looked down on me and snapped at me, that he was sick and tired of me bullying my coworkers. He handed me a letter, which were the signed papers of my contract's termination, signed by him of course. He informed me, that I had exactly two options now. I could either promise to do better, apologize to my coworker Igor, and admit I was his fault. Or I would be fired immediately. Well, the good thing of being bullied and terrorized for most of your childhood is, you learn to keep a cool head under stress. So I reined in my first urge, to discuss with him or to tell him, that such was illegal. Instead I took the letter and read through it before nodding a few times. Due to my cold, professional attitude, I was known for often remaining silent, so he took my nods as my complicance. He informed me, that he awaited my written apologies before 2 p.m., all of the bosses went home by 2 p.m., and came in around 8 or 9 XD. Well, when he turned around and marched out with a smug grin, he left me with the termination letter, with his signature on it. Fun fact, when both parties agree to it, a contract can be cancelled immediately, without any further responsibilities, beside paying for already issued hours, which go directly through human resources, via the electronic timestamps of our clocking. I had 2 hours left until his deadline, and I spent it to carefully clean my workplace, make a backup of my work laptop, ACC to the rules, and then, also according to the rules, clean the hard drive completely. The backup was put into the assigned server with all data correctly named and compiled. But of course, the server for backup data is marked as unsearchable as to avoid your search list getting cluttered, after all the same parts types came in again and again, with the same material numbers of course. If you know the rules, and knew where to search, you would find the stuff within 20 seconds, if not, well good luck mate, it's only like 10 TB or so. I made a copy of the termination paper, signed by me now too, and sent them to my email, which was allowed, put the original back into the envelope and packed my things up. Then I went up to the office, envelope in hand. The big boss showed his smug smile again the moment he saw me, but was quickly confused when he saw me with my laptop, work phone, and all that, too. I handed him the letter, offered a polite nod and turned around again. He shouted, where the hell I was going, him still holding the envelope in his hand. You terminated my contract, according to the rules, I am to hand over all personal equipment I had been handed by the company before leaving. Exception ACC to paragraph B are safety shoes and safety glasses. I bid you a fine day Mr. Freddy. I said that with a cold, calculated voice, trying my best to sound like a lawyer, simple because I knew he hated my professional attitude. Then I went to my own boss, and piled my stuff on his desk. My boss was confused as hell, asking me what was up. I briefly informed him, that my contract was terminated and that once more quoted the rule. My boss was a smug ass, too, but he wasn't all dumb. His eyes went big as he immediately realized, that I was the only person he had left, that actually knew how to maintain and properly operate the measuring machine. And that he had such a backlog already, that other departments, relying on the measurements, had started to enforce short-time work. He was first lost for words and then rushed into Freddy's office to see that termination letter. Meanwhile I changed my clothes in the locker room, went to the gate and asked the security guards to please have a full inspection of my person and my backpack. This was likewise regulation for personnel that was terminated on short notice, and while the security guards were pretty baffled, that I asked to be searched, they complied. They searched me fully and handed me a written confirmation, that I had nothing on me, that belonged to the company. My now ex-boss tried to call me all the time on my way home, but I dislike having phone calls in public transport, so I simply muted them and continued reading my book until I got home. There, 4 p.m. by now, so well past his own time to go home XD, I finally answered his call. He tried to convince me, that I needed this job and that all this could be sorted. My reply, I will have a new job within a week, you will need to take at least a month to train someone new on the machine, if you had anyone that could train a new person. I tell you what. Give me a solid contract with triple the pay and I come back. Oh, and I want a written apologize from Freddy, too, as well as my piece when working. He told me that I was completely unreasonable with such demands, again me, so to get this clear. 3 times I discover massive bullshit happening, 3 times you guys try to heap the blame on me and then you guys literally try to humiliate me and Freddy does actually fire me, and you want me to be reasonable? Well, guess it would be reasonable then to just ignore you then. Please be well. I hung up then and blocked his number, as well as any other number with which he would try to call me later on. The aftermath. As I had mentioned before, I still had ears in the company, so I have a good idea what followed. The facility suddenly had its most sensitive bottleneck tightened even further, and then clogged full of concrete soon after. No one maintained or cleaned the measuring machine anymore, and being a precision machine, it didn't took that lightly. Vladimir was soon called in multiple times a day to fix a problem, which in return built up a backlog for him in other places. Things I, or previously Antonio, had fixed within a minute now took hours, just for Vladimir to find time to come over and fix it, in a minute XD. He tried explaining stuff to Igor but yet, didn't worked well. Other departments ran completely dry of work, and of course they didn't wanted to bear the blame for missed deadlines, so the whole issue was pretty quickly reported up the ladder, and with no one wanting to take the hit, it climbed higher and higher, before it was eventually got onto the desk of the national CEO of the company, the highest entity of the company this side of the Great Pond. Found that out via a friend in HR. Was followed was the arrival of the proverbial kill squad, you know the modern equivalent to an executor, a bunch of guys in very tight suits, no sense of humor, cold eyes and the strict command to find someone's head to put on a silver plate. As far as I heard even a prosecutor from the USA was among them. I was called by the company a month later, asking if I could come in for an interview, not a job interview mind you, but they asked me to give my statement on the whole affair. This wasn't a legal thing, and they had no way to force me to make a statement, as it was an internal investigation, but I still happily complied and even gave my signature that I told the truth. Gave them the entire story, as accurate as I could and openly admitted what I didn't know or where I was only guessing. They thanked me, and apologized, honesty I felt, that they could not pay me for the time they took from me due to legal reasons. I was all fine with that and went home. Igor got fired for careless negligence, his brother Boris likewise got the immediate boot in the ass. My boss went down under as well, he and Boris were fired for mismanagement. Their boss however, Freddie, he got not only fired, but dragged in front of court, no idea how that went on, as he was dragged to the US. But given how ridiculous that justice system is, and that he had been designated as a scapegoat by one of the biggest companies worldwide, wouldn't be surprised if he had to hold very tightly on the soap for a good while. The entire facility went firmly in the reds for that year, due to nearly all contracted reworks missing deadlines, which means a daily fees of tens of thousands per contract. My ears in the company soon sought themselves new jobs, despite in one case being there for 20 years. Last I heard, is that the company had to contract the producer of the measurement machine to train new employee how to operate it properly. I had asked for triple my pay, well those guys were more like triple the zeros at the end XD. Oh. And I did find a new job within one day. I was fired on Monday, had the interview on Tuesday, a test work day the Thursday. I was asked at the end of that day when I could start. Which was the next Monday. I do manual measurements now, in a incoming quality control department. The boss is a blast, the team is all friendly and my commute is 18 minutes with an electric scooter. I work there for 9 months now, and I already am the de facto team leader for first sample stuff, and best of all, I am appreciated for the work I do, too, smiley face. Hope you liked this long story. You can't be sick for that long, bring her back to school, by user Kim Goodby. This happened when I was in elementary school but the compliance was my mom's. I got whooping cough which has a lifespan of 100 days. We got a doctor's note from my school and everyone seemed fine with it except the main office administrator who was constantly calling my mom to bug her about when I was coming back. About a month in she calls my mom and tells her it's impossible I've been sick for this long and if I'm not in school on Monday she's calling social services. Keep in mind at this point I can barely lift my head, I sound like Darth Vader and every few minutes I start coughing like I'm doing an impression of a goose fighting a Toyota. My mom was so sick of this shit that she put a mask on me and took me to school in a taxi. She practically had to drag me to my class and didn't even bother leaving. I got sent home before the bell even rang. Because of school policy I was sent to the office and had to be signed out which meant nasty admin lady got to see exactly how miserable and sick I was. She then had the nerve to ask me how could my mom even consider sending me to school. Unfortunately for her my mom just to walk up a flight of stairs to come get me, because she knew what the hell was gonna happen. She signed me out and let the admin lady know that I would cough on anyone who thought I wasn't really sick. Edit, because lots of people are asking about vaccinations. I'm not in the US, I've just googled it and it's not standard here to give the vaccine to children under 18. I think it may be something they do for pregnant moms, but we immigrated and my mom got her prenatal care at a very small underfunded hospital. My mom was super on top of all my vaccinations. Also to the people commenting and messaging me to say my mom is a terrible person/parent. She was effectively the sole parent to 2 kids. At the point this story was happening I had been extremely ill and she was at her wit's end. She worked full-time and didn't drive, which made getting me to the doctor already really hard without my school threatening CPS on her. She did her best to make sure I didn't breathe on anyone or even go near them. Worth mentioning, there were no other cases at my school, before or after. You need a doctor's note to prove sickness or we'll sack you, by user Yarn Wonder. I was reminded of this because of another post and happened almost 20 years ago. I had been working away in a restaurant and had just finished a Saturday day shift. It wasn't common to get a Saturday night off as it was our busiest night, and the boss was making me feel I should be offering to do overtime because they were being so kind to me. The last hour of my shift I started feeling crappy. By the time I got home I was exploding at both ends and really miserable. I was hoping I would feel better the next morning, but still felt awful. I dutifully phoned in sick because I couldn't be around food until I had been vomit/diarrhea free for 24 hours. My boss immediately assumed I was hungover and threatened to fire me for letting everyone down. I said fine because I wasn't about to go into work. At the time my flatmate was helping the same restaurant out because they were short a chef. He goes into work and is telling boss how sick I am. He didn't know I had been threatened, but it meant that boss phoned me back and said if I could provide a sick note for the day I wouldn't lose my job. At this time my job was paying about €300 a week and a doctor's appointment and sick note was going to set me back €100. Fine, if you're going to assume the worst about me when I had never phoned in sick before, done. I got the grumpiest doctor who was pissed I had made an appointment for this when he had actual sick people who needed to see him. The doctor signed me off for a full week. Instead of helping out to cover one of my shifts they had to cover another 5 shifts and I got a week off paid. Have to come into the office with the flu? Okay, by user Heathen Yak. About 10 years ago my employer didn't have a sick leave policy, it was at your supervisor's discretion. One year I got the flu and was in bed for several days. On the 3rd day my supervisor called and said I had to come into the office the next day. I explained I have the flu and look and feel terrible and was still very sick. He said no excuses and no exceptions, his policy is 3 days max. So the next day I went into the office and the president of the company said, "Jesus, why are you here? You look terrible, go home." I explained that I had to see my supervisor since he said I had to come in. Supervisor sent me home after the president told him he had to. The next week about 75% of the staff in that office was out with the flu for the week. It was a quiet week for me.